Namaste, everybody. Welcome to Wisdom Wednesdays, and a special thank you to our tech Parker and our students who are helping us with the Q&A, Lisa and Bev. Thank you very much. Tomorrow, when you, after this is edited by Parker, you'll be able to find this talk in your streaming video account. So a lot of people are enjoying the Wisdom Wednesday talks after, and it's very good to hear them again because quite often we miss a lot. So today I'd like to welcome Jeffrey to Wisdom Wednesday. He's our host. He's the founder of VASA, Vedic Academy of Science and Arts. He's also the co-chair of the Vedic Friends Association and a scholar on the British Board of Dharmic Scholars. As a yoga practitioner for the last 50 years, he retired from corporate life 23 years ago and has been teaching full-time on behalf of the Vedic Sanatan Dharma. Jeffrey's a best-selling author, philosopher, poet, and Vedic astrologer, and he has a new book about to come out called The Bhagavad Gita Comes Alive, a radical new translation. And our special guest today is back for her second time. We absolutely love her, is Laura Plum. Laura is an Ayurvedic practitioner, founder and director of Veda-Wise, a leading faculty for the Ayurvedic Integrative Nutrition 200-hour professional training, author of the best-selling, my favorite cookbook, I have to say, Ayurvedic Cooking for Beginners. She's a presenter of an online course called The Medicine in Your Kitchen, Introduction to Ayurveda Cooking, hosted by Spirituality and Health, and she's the host of a 3-part television show, Cleanse Veda, available through Gaia and Amazon, and also a 12-part series called Divine Yoga, available on Amazon. So, Laura, welcome. It's a thrill to have you here.
Thank you. It's an honor.
I'll turn it over to Jeffrey because today's topic is how the current planetary agitation is affecting us and what do we know about it, and how to use Ayurveda, Vedic astrology, and Vedic wisdom as a holistic approach to achieve right living, harmony, and balance in your life. Nothing like a big topic for today, so I'll turn it over to Jeffrey and let's just dive in.
Thank you, Sandy. And namaste and welcome to everyone. Just a little protocol so you all know it officially. I'm sure many of you do. Many of the cultures of the world are sensitive right now to the fact that their cultures are spreading, especially India. So if you want to show people that you're practicing their culture in a deep and respectful way, always begin honoring the gurus who brought the knowledge forward in history. Because India is a thousands and thousands of year old culture. For the sake of this discussion, think 10,000 years at least of continuous cultural history, with the Sanskrit language holding the texts in place in a seamless way so there's no drift. So persons from generation to generation have held that wisdom and passed it forward so it has reached us intact. So when we say, Om Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwaraha, Guru Sakshad Para Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. We show, thank you all, thank you, Laura. We show that we're enthusiastic participants in the knowledge on its sacred basis. That we're not just grabbing pieces of it and stitching it together for our own purposes or to make ourselves famous or one thing or the other, but rather that we're taking the whole reverence in for sacred wisdom that has been given to us so generously by a culture that was first colonized quite brutally. And my joke about it is then they said, wait, you took the money and you took all the wealth, but you forgot the crown jewels. Mm-hmm. And all their gurus came to the West and gave us this knowledge. So generous.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting too, many of the Brahmins said it's not right to leave India. You will be sort of almost contaminated, or you'll be tempted to have your guna go down by coming to the West. So it was a great sacrifice that they even attempted it.
Yeah, what Sandy's saying is that the lifestyle of the gurus in India was so clean and balanced and perfected that when they came to Western civilization, the rough, mostly meat-eating, not very balanced lifestyle was really frightening to them.
Can you imagine putting a sadhu in the Wild West?
Yeah. It's like going to a slaughterhouse looking for a veggie burger. It's not likely. You're a pioneer. So this brings us to what Laura and I are going to share with you today. And she and I have in common a deep interest in the Vedic knowledge, the fact that we practice it rather than just talk about it, and have for many years, and that we both are students of and practitioners of Jyotish, Vedic astrology, but each practitioner specializes in something that's very dear to them and to their heart and to their skills. So Laura is a specialist in our subject today in a very deep way, which is, and I'm going to pose this to you all as a question, then let Laura say something. Just think for a moment. Have you heard any mainstream broadcasts about COVID-19 wherein there was a deep discussion about how lifestyle will heal us, will protect us? Have you heard, since the elders are the most at risk with one, two, or three already chronic problems, many of which are diet-induced, I might add, have you heard anyone say how lifestyle could protect us? My joke about the oxygen, about masks and you can't breathe, is not really a joke. If you wear a mask, you can't breathe as well. You get less oxygen. What is the medicine for COVID-19? The same one they give to mountain climbers who get altitude sickness for not getting enough oxygen. So that makes sense. Let's wear masks and not get enough oxygen and walk around feeling safe. So with that, I'm going to introduce Laura to you and let her chat for a moment about lifestyle.
Thank you. Wow, thank you. First of all, I'm feeling very emotional as I'm listening to you. I'm feeling like I want to just lay my body down on the banks of the Ganges and say thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, Jeffrey, for being also a carrier of this wisdom, and thank you. The reason that I studied Jyotish is thanks to you. And thanks for being such a beautiful model of how to really respect the culture, even as we seek to share it. So thank you. Just deep, deep, deep gratitude and pranams to you and to all of our teachers. Deep pranams to my own teachers of Ayurveda. I do remember many years ago getting your book, where you also talk about, is it God Goddess, the astrologer, where you also talk about the Ayurveda and the doshas. Yeah, so beautiful. So you've been such a deep and important influence in my life, and even in the talking about the Shaktis, I'll never forget you and Sandi. We were sitting in our sitting room, and we had a friend visiting, and he asked you, but what about the divine feminine? We never hear about that. And your mouth just dropped to the floor, a little like you just, your eyebrows just now went up. What? And you had a conversation about it. And I remember at that moment, I thought, this is why I'm alive. This is why I'm alive. This is the wisdom that I want to share with the world. And in that sense, you were really, I have my moon in Anuradha. You ignited, you ignited something very deep and important in me. And so again, thank you.
Well, I remember coming to San Diego and thinking what a bright light you were. We were not expecting a light like you in San Diego, let me tell you. So we were thrilled.
I have a little joke about this because I was born in 1946, now you all know, and it was just post-World War II. My father was an Air Force pilot, is stationed in Mumbai in India, and at 19 years old. So my joke is that I was in India 5,000 years ago when Krishna was there, and they said, we need volunteers who want to take birth under very difficult circumstances and share this knowledge around the world. And everyone else backed up, and I didn't. So I was dropped behind enemy lines in Detroit, Michigan, into a family that was quite surprised to end up with a Hindu in their midst. And the eldest son of that family, I was, as all of you no doubt were, confused by my education and upbringing. I didn't know what was wrong, but I always knew something was wrong. It was like missing vitamins. It was like there's something not in my dinner. I don't know what it is. I've never had it, but something's not right. And isn't that the feeling, Laura?
Yes, and I love that your father sort of went to India to get you. Like, right? Some seed was planted and then you're born into this. I love that.
He was a 19-year-old. The truth is, he swam in the Ganga, and I asked him, I called him from the ashram years ago, said, Dad, you were in India? And he said, yeah. I said, did you swim in any rivers? He said, yeah, the Ganga. And I said, yeah. I said, did you go to any temples? He said, yes. I said, did they give you any food? He said, yeah, prasad or something like that. Prasad. And, of course, what nobody knows except people who've been in India and been in the culture is that the priest of a temple, when someone comes in and here's this young, good-looking 19-year-old American, he's never seen one before, who comes in, looks around with some interest and curiosity, he gives him some prasad, and then to himself, he blesses him, may you have a son who is devoted to Vishnu and Lakshmi.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Of
The
course.
power of that, right? Wow. Unbelievable. And you didn't even know it. I mean, you are devoted and you didn't know that until later.
I didn't know that story till I was 23 years old in the ashram, and I asked him about it.
That's so powerful.
Yeah. And the feminine divine was, to me, the missing vitamin, because as I grew up, the first impact that the feminine had upon me was to see that they were wearing an angelic, a divine, a something, beauty that was so amazing that it needed to be explained. Science class was boring by comparison. Why does beauty affect me so? Was the philosophical question, which led eventually to Bhakti and to the feminine divine and to the Vedas and Saraswati, all of these conceptualizations that they have that explain beauty.
All right, let's get back to our question with Laura, though. I want to hear all about some health. I could talk about the divine feminine for days, and I'm sure it's interesting to some of the people, but we have a topic.
Okay, me too. I could stay with this one forever. Well, speaking of the divine feminine, we have our beautiful Mother Earth. We have our beautiful Mother Nature. We have our Dev Bhumi. We have a world that is full of beauty and bounty, and it is always seeking to strengthen us. And I think, I have a blog, I called it Food, a Love Story. And it's not that I do or don't love food. It's rather that I think food is love seeking to love you all the time. And what happens when you fall in love? You feel awake, you feel expansive, you feel enlivened, you feel strong, you feel confident. And actually nature does that to us too. So nature, to me, is an expression of beauty and love, seeking to enliven us all the time. Beautiful. And to me, therefore, Ayurveda is really the science of that, the art of that. Ayurveda is inviting us back to a relationship with nature. And when we look at what happened with COVID, I agree with what you said, Jeffrey. And another way, just to turn that to the other side of that same coin, while I don't see the media, I don't know, I don't pay that much attention to mainstream media, especially now. It's very vata deranging right now. And that's one thing that we can talk about. But the other side of the coin there is, I felt in March, wow, people want to know about Ayurveda now. Or another thought was, wow, Ayurveda is more relevant than ever. Wow, maybe Ayurveda can give some answers. Now, I did see somebody who grew up in India, who was doing what I think is a kind of cultural appropriation. He's like, I invented personalized medicine. I invented this idea of going back to nature. And I think wherever we're from, I think it's important that we recognize, as Jeffrey said, this is at least an 8,000-year-old, 10,000-year-old tradition, right? And it came from something that we can all participate in. It came from paying attention. So the yoga of Ayurveda is to cultivate dharana, pay attention to nature, pay attention to how nature is seeking to love you, enliven you, and strengthen you, and pay attention to your own individual response to the aspects of nature. So what feeds you best, what nourishes you best, what doesn't nourish you, rather than I love or I hate, how about this nourishes me and this doesn't nourish me.
Right.
And Ayurveda is just about really cultivating that relationship, which ultimately is a relationship with Krishna and Radha. It's ultimately a relationship with a really extraordinary, genius world of beauty and radiance. And so it's about health, but it's about something so much more than that, even more magnificent and beautiful and mighty and powerful even.
I just want you to keep talking. And as you were, I thought of something, a little linguistic thing, that the word bhumi, which is this Sanskrit word for Mother Earth, before we called her Earth or Gaia or any of the other names that are also used. So bhu in Sanskrit means to be. And so it's where we be. But from it, when it was pronounced in English, came humi. So we're human beings. They just dropped the B of bhumi. So we became.
Jump up and down here in that. Wow.
We became. We're humus beings.
Yeah. We're behumus.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know, but my puppy is called Bhumi.
No way.
There you go.
Bhumi, and partly because we just love the sound of it. And Om.
Oh, that's so funny.
Swaha. Yes, yeah.
We had no idea.
Yeah.
That's great.
She's my little Dev Bhumi. Yeah. Well, so, in terms of what you said, for instance, about oxygen, when we think about what's going on with COVID, what Ayurveda would offer us is what Ayurveda is always offering us, which is to strengthen our ojas.
And that's ojas. What is ojas?
Yes, and so ojas is, there's different ways to define it. So, but from an Ayurvedic point of view, it's said to be the end product of digestion and metabolism. So it's the end product after you've eaten your meal, and then it's been digested in your belly by your primary Agni, your Jatara Agni, your belly fire, your digestive fire. Then it passes through 7 tissues where it's metabolized. So each tissue has its own fire. And after it's fed all 7 tissues, then it goes and becomes ojas. Now, ojas can be defined differently if you're a yogi, but ultimately it's so beautiful if you think about when you are a baby in the womb, your mother sends from her body, she sends 8 drops of ojas. It's said to be these 8 drops of nectar to your heart, right? So that you start your life already with ojas inherited from mama. Ojas is what gives us strong immunity. It's also said to give us contentment, patience, a sense that we are whole, and a sense that we feel integrated and good. You could just say it makes you feel good, but it helps you helps your body defend against the foreign invaders like bacteria and infections, things that might give us flu or the common cold. But it also helps us feel strong, and again, to feel really alive. And ojas is not just fed by our food, but ojas can be strengthened through deep and important rest. And it can also be strengthened through devotional practices. Bhakti yoga is said to actually help strengthen our ojas, partly because it helps us to really strengthen the heart. And again, the purest ojas is that which resides in the heart. So with COVID, what we're talking about is how do we strengthen ojas? But again, we always want to have strong ojas. We always want to be strong, ready to really live our lives open and free, because we know that our body can manage all that is being is flowing through it, all that it's meeting every single day. And so what we want to think about is, what kinds of foods are we eating? Our food should be wholesome. It should be whole. It should be organic as much as possible. We want to try to absolutely avoid GMO. We want to make sure that our food comes from the earth and not a factory, that it's as unprocessed as possible. So try to look for food that doesn't need a label of what the ingredients are. It doesn't need plastic around it. Better that you have it in its own packaging, like the banana skin or the zucchini peel, right? And the other thing that's important about maintaining ojas is eating seasonally. And a lot of us don't know anymore what foods are seasonal. Right? It's nice to use raspberries in December because red is a pretty color around the holidays, but raspberries aren't necessarily a winter fruit. So it's really important the way you can know what is seasonal is you can go to your farmer's market, and then you're going to be eating not only seasonally, but you're going to be eating locally. When you eat local, you're eating, you could say, in context. Years ago, I studied shamanism, and the shamans would say that if you're going to take an elixir that's been made from the herbs, they should be the herbs that are grown in your area, in your environment. And they called that being in context. In terms of food, that means the bees are pollinating the foods that are according to you, where you live. And that means the food that you eat that comes from where you live is going to be that much more powerful in helping you defend against whatever issues are. Right now I've got a lot of allergies, puffy eyes from the allergies. And so the local honey or the local pollen that I can get is going to be the best, rather than importing it from Boston. So it is about reducing our carbon footprint, but it's also, this is what I love about the world, is that our world is so whole, yata, pende, tha, brahmande, that when we do what's right when you do what's right for you, when you cook with your own two hands, when you eat in the best way possible for you, you're echoing out, right? There's a resonant field that echoes out from you that helps to uplift and strengthen the whole.
So if I've got you right, Laura, you just said, be here now, B-E-E.
So many body types, though, Laura, eat for their dysfunction, do you want to talk about?
Well, if I may, Sandi, I want to set a context for this because what you're sharing with us is so important. So I just want to point out why our culture doesn't think it is. So if you think of the last 400 years, the European cultures that came to North America in particularly and went out through the world with an agenda to take whatever they could, to just take wealth, and then they felt justified in doing this because the Pope at that time issued what they called a papal bull that said, you have my blessings to go out in the world and do this in the name of Jesus. Now, if you think about it, that's pretty ridiculous because Jesus seems, I always thought, to be a pretty nice fellow. And the idea that he would shoot someone, harm them, rape them, go out in the world and do violence is so absurd. It's like the nicest person you know grabs an assault rifle and goes crazy. You wouldn't expect it. So from that, I'm just going to say this quickly, came what were the first corporations. Corporations were the organizations that organized the looting of the cultures that were taken over. The East India Company, all of those companies named for coming and stealing everything, the resources from the new culture that they were dominating. So this is the historical backdrop of America, not democracy, but in fact, invasion and pillage. Democracy came from the First Nations on the East Coast, the Iroquois Confederation, and came to the US in the midst of that colonization. Now flash forward. Our last wars, World War I, World War II, and all the other conflicts where we're out bombing everybody, our solution seems to be an aggressive solution where we fight against something, win, applaud ourselves, say congratulations. Now come forward, our modern corporation started 100 years ago. And from that, the pharmaceutical companies and the industrial civilization that we've been in the midst of organized those companies just like the military, which is why there were no women. Those corporations to this day have only one agenda, the same as the colonizing ones: profit for the shareholders. So we live in the midst of a profit for shareholder, conquer and take civilization. So if you watch what just happened with COVID, it was like a movie playing, repeating World War I, World War II, Vietnam. We have a problem, what do? We carpet bomb it. We go blow it up, we inject it with something, we fight against it, and what we do not do is inquire of it, learn from it, find out its name, find out what we might be doing wrong, find out how to bring everything to, and this is where I'll end this little reflection, is balance. So isn't that the secret of yoga and Ayurveda? Please explain.
Well, absolutely. So I'll answer that, but I want to come back to something you said so important. Balance is the essential key word in Ayurveda. So Ayurveda understands that any living system, any biological system, it's not just humans, but your garden, any living system, restored to equilibrium or homeostasis, can spontaneously heal itself or regenerate. That's pretty powerful. So it's not that the medicines make it heal. It's not the injections that make it heal.
Right.
It heals itself. But what we're seeking to do is to restore balance. That's what Ayurveda is seeking to do. And we restore balance through foods and through regulating our schedule, our day. Wake up at this time, eat at this time, do your yoga practice at this time, and trying to be regulated that way. That in itself is very, very healing or balancing. So balance is very, very key in Ayurveda. I like to think, though, that it's more harmony, just because balance sounds like a seesaw, whereas we're really talking about balancing 5 elements. And so in 5 elements, we're looking at how do we create the right harmony? And then what's the right harmony for you, back to Sandi's question, versus the right harmony for me? And then how can your harmony and my harmony harmonize together so we have that one song that we call the universe, everybody harmonizing.
I thought that was marriage.
That too.
It works.
That too.
Yeah.
And then that state of balance, or sattva, that state of balance in yoga, is what's necessary for transcendence to happen, right? Otherwise, we can get out of balance and we can have some deranged experiences. So balance is key to both, but you could say for different purposes. But I love what you said about corporate, and it brings me to something that I think is so important. When we talk about, for instance, cultural appropriation, and we're hearing that right now, and some of the sensitivity, and we're wanting to be sensitive to people who are who rightly we're giving the mic to now. We're saying, let's hear from you now. If anybody has ever been to India, and if you haven't been to India but you want to go, please go to Delhi, and please go to the place where Gandhi had where he was killed, basically, where he had his Mahasamdhi, if we call it that. There is the most beautiful teaching. They have this they have his footsteps where he goes from his room, he's going to the temple, and suddenly the footsteps stop because that's where he was shot. And then there's a walkway, and along the walkway they've put up these boards where they tell the story of the East India Company, and they tell the story of the British coming to India and removing people from their land, taking the land out from underneath people. Then these people now don't have nourishment, they don't have food. So now they've got to go work for the company at low wages. And just to sort of jump completely, when I think about, I think there's a wound on both ends.
Mm-hmm.
This is not about me, this is about really wanting to literally give voice to the people whose voices need to be most heard. But I also think that a lot of white people have the wound of what the French term is déraciné, which means to be de-rooted. We too have been de-rooted from our own culture. And then you find something like Ayurveda. When you say, it felt like when you were growing up, you were lacking the vitamins. When I was growing up, it was a very loving family. But it was when I went to Europe and I was living in Italy, and you feel this love, this demonstration of love everywhere. And then you go to India and you feel this depth of shanti, this peace, this love, this connection, like really, if you're in Kerala, it just feels like the land, the earth is rising up to hug you. It is so much love. And then you feel that it's then for me that you feel, wow, there's absence in our culture that we're not even necessarily aware of until we experience it from these others. And I think, why is there such a passionate interest now in Ayurveda? It's because it is a way of restoring us back to the earth, back to earth cultures, back to indigenous cultures that we've been so disconnected from. And that's something that, again, that's why I want to lay my body down on the banks of the Ganges and say thank you. Because we need it. Our world needs it. We need it as individuals, and we need it as a world. And that's why I go back to any living system. A culture and a society is a living system. If we as individuals can restore balance, and if we get to critical mass, which isn't 50%, it's only 10%. If we restore balance and get to critical mass, our societies can spontaneously heal themselves. And that's what really excites me. That we can have justice, liberty, love, peace for all, equity for all.
So if what you just said, if we apply it to the current situation we've just been going through, then could it not be that one perspective is that it's a crisis, the other is it's just the indication of the crisis that's been going on for a long time?
100%.
It's a symptom.
Absolutely. Finally, the boil came to the surface.
Thanks for that.
Yes. And if so, then, and I said this jokingly at the beginning, that when everyone mobbed the grocery stores, they took junk food and toilet paper. And I said, yeah, so one is the problem and the other one is getting rid of the evidence.
Right.
So if that's so, then if you think about it, it's not studying history that's part of our problem. We have a short memory. So the piece I want to add to this is the problem with these demonstrations based on skin is that the people demonstrating have most often bought into the paradigm because they're so traumatized. And so then they're looting stores because they're so frustrated and so hurt. And no one can blame them in one sense, but you can see that it's almost like bombing a country and thinking now we have peace. So did you know, this is a wonderful story, that in about 1880, a couple in England decided they wanted to go to India and help the poor people. So they decided they would teach them agriculture. This couple, whose names I don't remember right now, but they went to India, and when they got there, they found out that India had mastered agriculture to a level beyond their wildest imagination. And they started learning it. So then they wrote a book about the secrets of agriculture that have been contained in the culture of India. The person who read that book was named J.J. Rodale. And if you know the history, he founded a magazine in the 50s called the Vegetarian Magazine. So based on their findings, he became vegetarian, wrote a magazine, started having a regular magazine on vegetarianism. And so this is how the ideas that have slowly seeped into our culture have now reached, in the hands of the millions of female yogis, what I would consider the critical mass of a cultural renaissance. And this COVID is an opportunity for all of us to talk about lifestyle, to get persons like Laura on all the television shows till finally that's the voice that people are hearing from, and they're learning how to use the resources of healthy herbs and foods, not to fight against anything, but to be the best person they can be. Back to you.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I just want to say one thing. Since you're in Canada, you may have a little, I don't know what your information is, but the many of the people who are protesting in the United States are peaceful, and there has been interlopers, and a lot of the interlopers are on the extreme fringes, and they're deliberately, and this has been going on since the 1960s, they're deliberately coming in and vandalizing, looting, and agitating in order to make it look like
it's like the Black Lives.
Not only that, but the Black people of America have been vandalized and looted, and just look at Tulsa and what happened there.
Killed.
Yes.
And killed, and they continue to be killed. And so I feel right now like I just want to stand for them and stand for them and stand for them. And I really, really hope that America can deliver on its promise of
Remember, I'm
liberty
from
and justice
Detroit.
for all.
I'm from Detroit, so I was there in the 60s,
Yeah.
and I had a black
I don't, go ahead.
stepmother. My stepmother went insane and was in and out of mental institutions, and my father hired a black nanny for our house while he was at work. And I never saw her do anything but smile and laugh. And she became our other mother.
Wow.
So I had a black mother, a live-in for the day. She'd go home at night and be there 5 days a week, raising 3 children through diapers. And so without knowing it, I crossed cultures while I was just growing up. So this step requires us to say that we are the Atma. That's where I was going. The only way to overcome this is not to be sympathetic to people and not to just not be affected by skin color, but to define all of us as immortal beings on a long journey, so that we have the deepest respect for one another through the Namaste culture. Anything less than that is still fighting superficial symptoms that were started by violent invaders. And so to me, this conversation begins and ends as yogis, and in between, as you suggest, the utmost of caring and compassion for anyone who has been or is being colonized rather than loved, respected, and treated so that they flourish.
That's quite different from the divide and conquer philosophy of so many of the early corporations that colonized.
Or still.
Or still, yes.
This is an important conversation right now, I think. And even a friend and I were talking, and she does a lot of work with women in recovery. It's a place that she started here in San Diego that she's called Shakti Rising. And she has specifically worked with women because she's a woman. But one of the things that's fascinating is that she was pointing out, she said that the minute that we deny the feminine, then we can deny life, and life in the different ways it shows up. So now we can go and take slaves. Now we can go and own the land and not let anybody else have the land and kick the local people off.
Yes.
You know, yeah, it's a fascinating conversation, which is where, going back to where we started, which is my love for what you teach around the divine feminine, around the Shakti. It's so powerful. And I feel like Ayurveda is also empowering us to love the divine feminine as earth, as nature, as food, as beauty.
You'll notice, Laura, it's so, and first of all, it's so delightful having your voice in this conversation to say the things that everyone needs to hear in that tone of voice, in that heartfelt, from that place of wisdom and love. Because in our culture, we think that you're either in your brain, you're either smart or you're emotional. Please, that's absolutely not true. That I wrote something once that the secret of life is use what's left in your right brain and what's right in your left brain. So our goal as yogis is to first see ourselves and everyone in a long view that we're immortal beings and cannot die. I can't overemphasize this. Until fear is overcome, none of this will work, because fear is how people are controlled. The rest of it will happen not when we're a stronger military than them, but then when we are not afraid of, nor do we even believe that we die.
When we're willing to take a knee.
When that's just one more leap into the next adventure.
Yes. So I love that. There's so many questions I want to ask you, because I think about a conversation we had recently about the planets too, where Mercury might represent discernment. And that's so important to cultivate as a yogi. But it isn't enough. Remember, we were talking about Mercury's neutral. We had a great conversation recently about Mercury. I don't know if we should be staying on Ayurveda here. I guess.
I think let's move on. I've got to.
Okay.
I'd like to cover all the topics we promised everybody.
I just feel like one thing to say is that COVID has been reminding us how important our yoga is.
That's it.
And then we can also bring in the Ayurveda of whole foods, adaptogenic herbs, sipping warm water throughout the day, living with the seasons, getting enough sleep at night. But the yoga is where we can stay in our center.
Laura, last week I invented a name for this cure. It is Veda Vid 108.
I love it. Veda Vid 108. Oh, I love that.
It's Vedic Vid 108 is the cure for all the viruses and all the imbalances.
Yes.
And it starts here, from the heart, respecting every living entity, no matter what their body, what their color, what their culture. We start and end here.
Right. And if I can make that really practical for people, because I think most people here are yogis. When we talk about Ayurveda, we're talking about the Vata dosha, Pitta dosha, Kapha dosha, the air. I'm going to reduce it to air, fire, water. Of course, space is in there and earth is in there. But these dynamic elements of air, fire, water, when they go out of balance, they'll give us either Vata, Pitta, Kapha dosha. But what are the subtle energies? The positive side of that is prana, tejas, ojas. And through the practice of yoga, a really good yoga practice will help you cultivate your prana, your life force and your life flow, your tejas, discernment, light, clarity, and it will also help you cultivate ojas. And when you cultivate your inner self, your spirit, it's wise enough to know exactly what you need. So you need more prana at this moment, you need more tejas at the moment, you need more ojas. So if we really are able to cultivate yoga, that will help us stay in balance or restore balance if needed. It's always an inside job. And then from there, we can make skillful choices. We can make the right choice to live skillfully. And really, with all the uncertainty and even chaos of the time, and all the strong emotions of the time, now more than ever, stay in your yoga, not just to stay grounded emotionally, but because your yoga will also keep you strong physically. And I don't just mean good, strong yoga poses, but it'll give you that ojas that I was talking about, an underlying strength that'll help you cope with, deal with whatever's coming at you.
You know, Laura, as you mentioned Mercury, Buddha, earlier, the Sanskrit name for Mercury is Buddha. The other planet of interest in that conversation, of course, as you were suggesting, is Brihaspati. Most people haven't studied the Sanskrit, so they don't know what these words mean. The word Brihaspati means Brahman, the realm of light from which everything has emanated, and Spati, in English it became spout, to spout. So the guru is the spout of Brahman. This is the ultimate missing vitamin.
Vitamin J.
Vitamin B. This is who we really be we be Brahman. Bhumi were visitors. So if we use buddhi to figure everything out, we're thinking, I can think my way out of here. All I have to do is be a scientist and make a ship and fly out. And this is where we're wasting our time right now, trying to fly across the inhospitable space, separating us from the other star systems, when we should be focused upon, first, harmonizing our planet so that the well-being of everyone is guaranteed, and secondly, using sound vibration, which is what the Guru gives, is the secret, which is that sound vibration can carry us back to our origin. And so the secret of that sound vibration coming in, then when we know how to do it, we go, Om Bhuvasvaha. We,
Beautiful.
ha ha ha, we go back and have a direct experience. This is not blind faith. Blind is when you don't have the mantra. If you go to a movie and I say, you're just making that up, you'll say, you just didn't see it.
Yeah.
So the word Veda gives us the English word video, which means to see. So Brihaspati gives us the sound vibration that rearranges the molecules of our system in alignment with galactic north.
When we were at the Vedic Astrology Conference, many of the predictions for 2020 were quite dire. They saw the conjunction of all of these planets coming together. Nobody particularly predicted this virus, but they could all see that this was going to be a very difficult time. Do either of you see any relief on the horizon, planetary-wise?
Yes, that's where I was going to ask you to go. What do you think is going to happen once so maybe you want to start with what are those planets that have caused trouble, but I'd also love to hear what you think about the nodes moving in September.
Well, we were going to ask you. That was for you to. You slipped out of that one well.
Your teacher.
Well, before we go specifically to the planets, let's go specifically to the way that Ayurveda has taught us to look at ourselves. Before we ask what are the planets doing to me, let's ask, how do the planets live inside me? This is what you've been explaining to us, and you've become very skilled at explaining, is that there are departments having an ongoing conversation in our being who are a microcosm of the larger conversation that's going on in the nature around us. If I've got it right, that's what you said earlier. Who else said this was all the First Nations tribes of North America? Most people don't know this, and I didn't till recently, but if a man wanted to go to another tribe, he had to marry in and then convert his allegiance from his tribe to the new tribe. Why? Because the woman is the manifestation in an indigenous culture. The woman is the external manifestation of the place in which she was born. She's the Shakti of that place. So the man going from his tribe to that other tribe had to follow her, not she him.
Yeah.
He had to serve the earth in that location through her.
Do you know what, I hear that, I love that, but I wonder if it's also because they needed him to come with that humility, that love, that devotion, rather than what might have been the alternative.
Actually, it's both.
Yeah.
First, it's true that she's the earth of that spot. And each tribe protected the animals in their area, became specialists in the herbs of their area, and then they shared that with each other over the interconnected travel across the continent. So we've lost this entire root. We're like a plant that doesn't have a root, which always comes through the female, and we don't know what's wrong with us. And so we're fighting everything that comes near us like an out-of-the-control immune system
Right.
called corporations.
Right. And they keep coming back to saying, well, vitamin D helps against COVID. Oh, why don't we, well, we'll wake up and go outside and do some Surya Namaskar. You know, they'll say zinc. Well, okay, let's get these vitamins and minerals from our food, right? Basically, they're saying the things that will help us with COVID are things that we could be getting by living a life in harmony with nature. Yeah.
So much of the food is contaminated, though, and has no nutritional value in it unless we are buying organic or growing it ourselves.
Well, and so yes, and if we add to that that we're allowing, again, profit-making organizations to sell poisons to our children, called Ronald McDonald. Now, that's the clown that sells us this poison. And so remember that the word in yoga is yogas chit vritti nirodha, but vritti is in the center of the word advertisement. Advertisement is how you put vrittis inside of children. So they think that smoking, drinking, and eating poison is called normal and is life. And this is why we can't get people to see this until they're ready to become healthy. And this is why yoga and Ayurveda, persons like yourself, are actually showing people how to make this their lifestyle, because otherwise it's just ideas, yes?
Right. And what Sandi said, just back to that real quick, is yes, we maybe can only get the full spectrum of vitamins and minerals if we eat food that's organically grown, non-GMO. And we have to do that because then we're supporting our farmers, and then they can grow their farms and provide more of that for more people everywhere. Or we can learn to farm ourselves and grow some of our foods ourselves, which is also, I think, an invitation that COVID is bringing.
We only have a few minutes left. Why don't you lead us to the close?
Okay.
And summarize how you see what our next step should be. Help us with that.
Well, you know, I think that the upcoming eclipse, we've got in the Northern Hemisphere, we have Mercury going retrograde today. We have summer solstice this weekend and a solar eclipse. And then we have a penumbral eclipse July 5th.
And Yoga Day.
And Yoga Day. And what are we asked to do during the time of an eclipse? Not go get your glasses and look at it, but actually go inward, go from the video of the eclipse, the viewing of the eclipse outside of you, to the vidya, just to borrow from what you said. Go inward and stare at the light within that can never be eclipsed. And I feel like COVID is asking that, the civil unrest is asking that. This is a time for us to go inward and to cultivate that deep ground of peace, to cultivate the beauty, to cultivate the devotion, to chant, to do the mantra, to bow down to Krishna and Radha, and then to look forward to the time when the nodes move from their most destructive place to when they go and join Krishna and Radha, coming soon.
As they enter Taurus and Scorpio.
As they enter Taurus and Scorpio, and then we'll go into those nakshatras of Rohini and Anuradha eventually. So I think that there's great, great hope. I think the sky is pointing us in a direction of hope, but I think we're not there yet. To me, the invitation of what's going on right now in terms of the planets is, and in terms of nature, and in terms of the world that we're experiencing, is this is a time for us to deepen into our yoga and to deepen into our Ayurvedic lifestyle practices, because they will set you free.
Even if food is not available.
Mm.
All right, let's open the videos up and let's take some questions and enjoy the conversation.
Thank you.
And if you have a question, thank you, Laura. If you have a question, anybody, raise your hand on the screen and I'll see if I catch it, or put a little. Rosario, you go ahead. You want to start first?
Hello, Rosario.
You'll have to unmute.
Okay. Hi, Laura. Thank you so much. I'm very pleased to see you again. And I felt that, this time to speak about Ayurvedic is much needed. And I have one question. Actually, I have more, but I will do only one because the other people are here. You talk about the relationship with the shamanic studies that you're doing. And I want to ask you, can you expand what you found about shamanic and the Ayurvedic connection? Is there any relation, according to you?
That's a great question.
And medicine and similar.
That could be a whole seminar, Laura, I think.
That would be an awesome seminar. Maybe we should do that. That's a great question.
We'll join.
So shamanism is said to be about 50,000 years old. And then the Vedas are said to be, and we can't, I don't think we can really say, but there's evidence of the wisdom, the practices dating back to maybe 8,000, 10,000 years ago. It's suggested that maybe the Vedic wisdom is an evolution of shamanic wisdom. What we know from shamanic wisdom is that shamanism seeks to heal the individual, the collective, and the environment together as a whole. And what I've seen in my deepest, and I want to say most reverent Ayurvedic friends in India, is that where they have Ayurvedic centers, they're seeking to heal the individual, their collective group of people, and the environment where they are placed. So they do a lot of feeding the poor. They do a lot of educating the children. They do a lot in terms of helping the local people restore their farms and their farming. And so to me, the most significant and important, I think, link, well, there's two. One is that it's through nature that we can heal. Nature is healing. Nature heals. And two, that the individual is a microcosm of the macrocosm. And that the individual healing must be linked and work together with the healing for the whole, of the whole. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if Jeffrey has more to say on that, but there's a professor at the University of Chicago Theology School, I'm blanking on her name, I might think of it in a second, but she draws this direct link from the shamanic history through the Vedas.
The one thing I will add to that, Laura, is just that what we don't know for sure is the antiquity beyond a certain point, because we don't have enough tangible evidence. And so it would just be speculation. But what we do know is that at a certain point, and clearly the Shiva and Durga show all the signs of in the forest, indigenous culture being one of the platforms of the Vedic civilization. So we know that the concept was that we're supposed to integrate with nature, and that the external goal is the well-being of the whole group, whatever group you find yourself in. I'll tell you a really wonderful Sanskrit word for this. The word is dhanam, D-A-N-A-M, dhanam. And dhanam is mistakenly translated charity. But charity is condescending, and it's already part of a principle where you let somebody not have enough and throw them some scraps or give them something. But the word dhanam means circulation of resources in the social body. So think of the social body as valuable as one's own body. If the social body is dying, how can the individual cells in it be healthy? So this is where the so-called caste system comes in. It was not by birth, it was by ability, and there were 4 groups: scholars, professors, warriors who protected, protectors, farmers and merchants who produced, and then providers who did a myriad of necessary tasks that made life possible.
And more beautiful. Painters, artists, musicians.
Yep. The providers were the legs and feet.
Housekeepers.
The producers were the stomach. The protectors were the arms. And the professors were the head. So just ask yourself which part of your body you'd like to get rid of. Which group of cells is unimportant? You should starve them and give them charity once in a while. Or should we circulate resources constantly so we know that all members of society have well-being? And Laura, this is the heart of indigenous culture, is it not?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I love what you said about Shiva and Durga. I've also heard that Lakshmi is considered a very, very ancient, well, she's certainly an ancient concept when we know about
Absolutely.
mother worship and divine feminine. Beautiful.
All right, who has got another question? Raise your hand. Diane? Alan? Okay, go. Your turn. Nice to see you.
Namaste, everybody.
Namaste.
So in Ayurveda, you talked about the doshas. Can you talk about them in terms of the seasons and in correlation even with viruses? I've been doing some reading of late and how, we talk about it as being flu season in the fall, but that's not necessarily flu season, it's nature.
What do you mean by its nature? Nature is
things die. Things
yeah.
die.
Yeah. Right. Well, generally speaking, the doshas again are Vata is the air element with some space. There's 5 elements: space, air, fire, water, earth, just for everyone. Vata is air and space. Pitta is fire with some water, and Kapha is water and earth. And everything in nature, and including time, has a dosha. So day has doshic times, right? The morning from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. is said to be Kapha time. So that's a good time to get up and bust the heaviness of Kapha. Water and earth are going to make mud. So we want to wake up and maybe do our exercise to bust out of that muddy, heavy feeling. 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. is Pitta time of day. And so that's why Ayurveda suggests your biggest meal is at midday, because that's when your fire is strongest, your Pitta time of day. And then 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. is Vata time of day. And then that cycles round again. Kapha is 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. Go to bed, use the Kapha energy to go to bed. 10 p.m. 2 a.m. is Pitta. And that's why if you didn't go to bed, now you've got the midnight munchies, or you're trying to make things, you're very driven, trying to get things done. And Vata people, oftentimes they wake up somewhere between 2 and 6 a.m. Oftentimes a Vata person will say, I wake up at 3 in the morning and can't go back to sleep, because that's Vata time of day, 2 to 6 a.m. Also why it's good to get up before 6 a.m. because the Vata is lighter and it's easier and it's a beautiful time to meditate. So same with the seasons. The seasons all have their doshic qualities. We're heading into summertime now in the Northern Hemisphere, and this is Pitta season. And it's interesting to notice that even though it could be warm in the spring, something about summer makes it's more humid, so we tend to perspire more. So there's the heat with a little bit of water. Then the autumn season is said to be the Vata season. It's very important that we don't get out of balance with too much Pitta, really, because if we've got overheated over the summer and we haven't balanced that, then we head into Vata season, the season, as you said, of things dying back, where we become more depleted. So we want to make sure especially in the autumn, we really need to make sure that we go in to autumn strong and balanced. So it's a really good time to reset both these Navratri times in the spring and in the autumn, the time of 9 days of devotion to the divine feminine. Those are times that are set Ayurvedically at perfect alignment for us to be resetting ourselves. And then, so Vata season is the autumn, and then it goes into winter. Winter is Vata into Kapha, and then spring is Kapha season. And spring is generally a time where I am, we have May, gray, heavy cloud, fog. People in the mountain areas might have the snows are melting off the mountains, and so the rivers are swelling. In Northeast or in Northern Europe, you've got lots of rain. So it's heavy, wet, and cold in the springtime. And so we want to try to eat to manage that. But that's why when we eat seasonally, the beauty of Mother Earth is that in her great love and genius, she's always giving us exactly the right food to balance the weather, to balance the climate of that season. So if we could just trust Mother Nature and go with her and her seasons, then we stay in balance. Again, it's this beautiful relationship of trust and love, just like Sandi said, it's like a marriage. Sometimes she's going to storm, right? But for the most part, she's very, very giving. So with the COVID, just then more specifically, people are suspecting that COVID will come back in the autumn, and that's because that tends to be flu season. And as you said, it tends to be Vata season. So we tend to be more prone. Our body's Ojas, you could say Vata is the opposite of Ojas. If Ojas is strength, contentment, patience, peace, sort of waxy lubrication in the joints, etc., then Vata is the opposite of that. Vata is dry, depleting, fatigued, too much restlessness, not in our center, so to speak. And so the most important time to build Ojas, you might say, is in the autumn, especially later autumn going into the winter. And it's a really important time for us to put on our socks, make, a cup of warm tea, sit by the fire, etc. But as I said, we don't want to build Ojas on top of a disturbed Pitta. We have to reduce the Pitta and then build the Ojas.
I remember Jeffrey telling a story about in the old days where you paid the doctor while you were healthy to keep you healthy, and you stopped paying him when you got sick because he was not doing his job.
That's better than the Jyotish master who would get his head chopped off if he didn't.
Oh, right.
And earlier in their conversation, what Laura just told us was a way of introspecting and matching what's happening in our system with nature. So if you extend this, astrology is just a language that says we have 9 departments, actually 10. We have our actual connection to Earth, which is the 10th, and we have 9 grahas, or departments of our being. Think of it as your bodily organs for the moment. You have a liver, you have a kidneys. Everyone in this conversation has a liver, a kidneys, heart,
Lungs.
all those vital organs. Now, think of those as the planets. And inside of our body, each of those, we were born with them in a certain degree of functional efficiency and working as they could optimally. So just think that the first thing we're trying to do from astrology is know when those 9 departments are talking to us. When is my Mars speaking to me? When is Venus speaking to me? When is Mercury speaking to me? When is Jupiter speaking to me? And how accomplished am I at listening to them and speaking back? This is called in astrology upaya, or adding ability to a planet that is dysfunctional. So if you add Jyotish and Ayurveda together, if you were going for a consultation 1,000 years ago in India, the Jyotishi and the Ayurvedi would look at you, take your pulses, check your chart, look at where things were transiting, look at where they were when you were born, look at what your blind spot is. They would put all of that together and jointly consult on not only where your lifestyle imbalance was, but where your vitamin and mineral imbalance was, where the planets were at any given time, what they might be disturbing or triggering in you that couldn't be fixed because it was a disturbance from the planet, or it was a wake up to you to fix a planet that's within your power to fix if you can recognize it as a department to work on. But what is our problem? We call all of these material departments self. You cannot change self. You can only change what is external to self with matter. You can only use matter to change matter. If you call matter self, then you end up in a war. And this is where the COVID went. Everything was a warfare. And right now, Bill Gates wants to inject everyone in order to control something that should be done from within, that should be done with an observation, and with a mind for us all to be immortal beings.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Should we give them some hope? I mean, I'm thinking that this, I don't know. Do you think that autumn we're going to see spikes? I'm feeling like nodes are moving. Jupiter will be direct in his own sign without Ketu. Saturn strong. I feel like we're going to get resourced in the autumn and become more, we have more power available to us. What are your thoughts?
Depends on who you are. Everything is happening to who you are. Not who you are, but how you've been living and what you're inside of. I was just talking to a client yesterday who just was at the beginning of Saturn crossing of her moon. In astrology, in Jyotish, it's a 7.5-year process when Saturn goes to the sign before your moon, during your moon, and after your moon. Now, when that happens, Saturn, the devil's in the details, or I like to say the Devi's in the details. So Saturn says, okay, we're going to clean house. We're now going to review all of your relationships to matter and see which ones are appropriate. For how long? Just 7.5 years. And what is the populace called it? 7 years of bad luck? No, 7 years of opportunity to change habits that don't serve you. And Saturn says, have I got your attention? So my joke is, the Saturn comes to visit you like a 500-pound fat man comes to your house and sits on all your furniture. Whatever breaks, you cry, Aunt Tilly gave me that couch. It has to be taken away. Now you have to get a new couch. And you go, oh, what's wrong? I have to get a new couch. Because we're just keeping score, am I getting what I want?
That new couch could be your husband or your wife or your...
It could be anything. We don't have the big picture, and the microcosm is just complaining that you don't give me what I want, Oi Veda. Instead, the planets are talking to us, but we don't know how to recognize their voice, and we don't know which department in us they are.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know you're not saying that the general planets don't affect everybody, but I think what he's saying is they will affect everybody to a different degree. Is that right?
Well, everyone, according to what they've done in the past and their past karmas, is more or less already susceptible. But if you spend 20 years making mistakes, it can't possibly take you 2 weeks to remedy them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And if you've been doing your yoga, if you have spiritual practice in your life, you're going to be affected quite differently than if you're totally unconscious of the world around you. So everybody's an individual in that. Any other questions?
Can I quickly just add in here what I love where you went with that, because I have a friend, Dr. Ram Kumar, who runs Videogram in near Coimbatore in Tamil Nadu. And whenever people will ask him a question, he'll, it seems like without knowing it, he'll start by saying, well, it depends. So finally, we had a joke with him. We said, Ayurveda is the science of it depends. So I love that Jyotish is too. It's going to depend.
Or science, Ayurveda is the science of interdependence.
Yeah. Both. Yeah. Depends. Everyone is individual, and it'll depend on your own individual, right? Karmas and natures.
All right, any other question, any other comments, any subject that this is our last Wisdom Wednesday, everybody. We're going to go into seclusion for the next 30 days to finish the glossary on the Bhagavad Gita. Our printer has informed us that they need final text by July 1st. That's 2 weeks from now. Now we're not ready, so we've got till July 15th to finish our work. And so this is our last goodbye, except for Guru Puja on July 5th, which we'll be hosting online as a webinar or in person for those lucky people in Vancouver. So it's the last time we'll see you till probably end of August or end of July. Any questions, anybody? Sharon?
It's not actually a question, but I know there's certain Native American, well, they would call themselves nations, which is probably more appropriate, that believe that they are one of the lost tribes of Israel. And there is a custom, I think, with both, at least certain sects of Jewish people and with Native Americans, of not eating shellfish. And the reason that I was given is because shellfish isn't natural to where they live. And so the shellfish were put at the shore for the people who lived by the shore. And I wish you, that's one statement, and then I wish you success with your deadline. I have a June 30th deadline. So anyway, may the deities bless all our deadlines, and we'll feel lively when we get them completed.
Well,
Kind of like nothing gets done unless there is a deadline.
you know, Sharon, a lot of this historical problems come from typos. I believe it was "don't be selfish," not "don't eat shellfish."
Well, I do know that in the Bible, I actually got in trouble in high school. I wasn't terribly good at doing my homework. And so in the Latin, it does not say, well, let's see, peace on earth, goodwill to men. It says peace on earth towards peace on earth towards men of goodwill.
Ah, there you
That's a
go.
good one.
I'm in Latin class, and I finally recognized what I'm supposed to be translating, only I hadn't translated. I was reiterating Sunday school, which was not accurate. So,
Well, you'll also like this, Sharon. It does not say in the beginning created he them. It says in the Hebrew, in the beginning, they created them in their image. Oh yeah, but that was edited into he. I wonder why.
So I love that you all have your deadlines. Sharon, by the way, who didn't do well in high school, went to Princeton or somewhere. So I love that you all have your deadlines, because the eclipse wants us to go in and focus on the matters of the heart. And I'm so excited about the Bhagavad Gita book coming soon, and that you're coming to closure on that. Do you want to tell us at all about that?
Well, you know, we had a long conversation with Nilesh Oak, and we asked him if he would do the foreword on it. Those of you who've been on know who Nilesh is. He wrote the book, The Dating of the Mahabharata. And his dating is a little bit controversial because everybody has the Gita at 5,500 years ago. And his dating, based on astronomical evidence, said it was actually 5,561 BCE. What everybody misses is that's 7,000 years ago. We're going to go with his dating, and it's just one of the reasons that we're calling this the Radical Bhagavad Gita. And when I asked him if he had there, Jeffrey asked him, and I followed up, what was the exact moment that Arjuna heard the Gita from Krishna? Did he have an actual time for it? Had they done those calculations? And he says, oh yes, October 16th, 5,561 BCE. So I said, great. We're all very excited about it. Jeffrey has made it so smooth, so easy to read, and so taken out all of these mistranslations of the Sanskrit. So the layperson, or right up to a deep practitioner, will receive benefit from this book. So we're all excited.
And I thought we might end up somewhere near here, so I brought a verse from the Bhagavad Gita that summarizes what we've been talking about. It's the chapter 18, verse 61, almost the very end. And it says, Ishvara Sarva Bhutanam Hrideshe Arjuna Tishtati Brahmayan Sarva Bhutani Yanti Rudani Mayaya. And this is the translation. O Arjuna, I am the Supreme Being and the ruler and director of all beings. And I live in the hearts of everyone, just as they live somewhere. From there, I cause all beings to revolve as if they were attached to a machine that turns them around and around. You'll notice in the Sanskrit it said yantra. Our horoscope of birth is called a yantra. The yantra of our current birth is the merry-go-round that we are stuck to, attached to. And the merry-go-round itself is samsara, repeated birth and death. And again, vrittis are caused by the twisting of orbits. Orbiti is vritti. But within each person's heart is that being whom we can address and be in a loving connection with, so that when the moment to exit this particular body comes, we let go of our attachment to our horoscope. And we stop calling that myself. Because we know that it's not myself, it's just my car. Ma. Every time we have you with us, Laura, it is so delightful, so wonderful. We just want to do it again and again.
Yes, I love you both so much. Thank you. Full body. When I talk about lying down on the Ganges, I hope people understood it was full body prostrations, and full body prostrations to you both, to the great wisdom.
And
of
to you.
We're so proud of you.
Thank you. Love you.
All right, everybody.
Pranams, pranams.
All right, everybody. We'll see you again. Hi, Farad.
And everyone else, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.
May this knowledge live in your heart. May you never forget it. May you always remember it. And may it lead you to divine service and to the highest possible goal and destination in a gracious and beautiful way.
Namaste.